Welcome back, dear friends and story lovers. Tonight, we bring you a tale where love is tested, secrets come to light, and fate takes an unexpected turn. Every moment will pull you in deeper, and every choice could change everything. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and if this story touches your heart, like, subscribe, share it with someone who believes in true love, and hit the bell so you never miss the next chapter. Asterisk, the crystal chandelier cast fractured light across Sebastian Hartwell's face as he adjusted his black tie for the 5th time. The Grand Plaza Hotel's bathroom mirror reflected everything he'd built at 29. A tech empire worth billions. A reputation that opened every door, and a soul-crushing emptiness that no amount of money could fill. Tonight's charity gala, buzzed with fake laughter and calculated conversations just beyond the marble walls. And Sebastian felt like a prisoner preparing for execution. He splashed cold water on his face, watching droplets cling to his angular jaw. 3 months since he'd discovered Cassandra's true nature. 3 months since he'd called off their engagement. And still she haunted him like a beautiful, relentless ghost. The voicemails grew more desperate each day, the accidental encounters more frequent. Tonight, she'd corner him again with those predatory eyes and that smile that once fooled him into thinking she loved him instead of his bank account. The ballroom doors opened to reveal Sebastian's personal hell disguised as philanthropy. White orchids adorned every table, their pristine petals reflecting the golden glow from above. The string quartet played Mozart while 200 of the city's elite mingled in designer gowns and perfectly tailored suits. Sebastian moved through the crowd like a shark among minnows, his practiced smile hiding the revulsion that churned in his stomach. "Sebastian, darling." The voice sliced through his defenses like a blade dipped in honey. Cassandra Vale materialized. Beside him, in a blood-red dress that hugged every calculated curve, her platinum hair caught the light as she moved closer, trapping him against the silent auction table with predatory grace. "Cassandra." His voice could have frozen champagne. "I thought we agreed to keep our distance." "Oh, sweetheart, you can't still be upset about our little misunderstanding." Her manicured fingers reached for his arm, but he jerked away. "I've had time to think, and I realize we belong together. We're perfect for each other. Perfect for each other. Perfect for her social climbing ambitions and insatiable greed." Sebastian's jaw clenched as memories flooded back. The overheard phone call where she'd laughed about managing the naive billionaire. The wedding planner bills charged to his account without his knowledge. The prenup she'd tried to get him to sign while drunk. "It's over, Cassandra. We want different things." Her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something desperate and ugly underneath. "You're making a mistake, Sebastian. We had something special. Don't throw it away because of some silly pride." Sebastian's eyes frantically searched the room. For escape? That's when he saw her. A young woman weaved through the tables with a silver tray, offering champagne to guests who barely acknowledged her existence. Unlike the mechanical servers who moved like well-programmed robots, she had a natural grace that drew his attention. Chestnut hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, warm brown eyes that sparkled with genuine kindness as she smiled at everyone. She served. She helped an elderly woman retrieve a dropped purse, shared a quiet laugh with a lonely gentleman at a corner table. She was real in a room full of facades. "Sebastian, are you even listening to me?" Cassandra's voice grew sharper. "More demanding? I'm talking about our future together." But Sebastian was already moving. Desperation and an inexplicable attraction to the mysterious server drove him forward like a man possessed. Without thinking, driven by pure instinct, he walked directly toward her. "Excuse me," Sebastian said, gently touching the woman's free hand as she turned in surprise. His heart hammered against his ribs as he made the most impulsive decision of his carefully controlled life. "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart." The woman's eyes widened in confusion, her tray wobbling slightly in her grip. Brown eyes Sebastian had ever seen, warm and honest in a way that made his chest tighten with unexpected longing. She began, clearly bewildered. "Please," Sebastian whispered, low enough that only she could hear. His eyes pleaded with her as Cassandra approached like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. "Just for a moment. Please help me." Something in his expression must have convinced her. Maybe it was the genuine desperation he couldn't hide, or perhaps the vulnerability that cracked through his confident facade. Whatever it was, she made a split-second decision that would change both their lives forever. "There you are," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos erupting in her mind. "I was wondering where you disappeared to." Relief washed over Sebastian like a tidal wave. "Natalie, I'd like you to meet Cassandra Vale. Cassandra, this is Natalie Brooks, my girlfriend." The word hung in the air between them like a loaded gun, and Sebastian watched Cassandra's perfect mask shatter into 1,000 pieces. Cassandra's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the shock that rippled across her face. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air as she processed this unexpected development. The predator had become the prey in a single, devastating moment. "Yes," Natalie said, surprising herself with how natural the lie sounded. She shifted her tray to one hand and extended the other to Cassandra with a polite smile that masked the terror clawing at her insides. "It's nice to meet you." Sebastian watched in amazement as Natalie handled the situation with more grace than most people born into this world managed. There was something about her presence that immediately commanded respect. Despite her server's uniform and modest appearance, she stood straight, met Cassandra's gaze directly, and didn't flinch when the other woman's grip tightened painfully around her fingers. "How lovely," Cassandra said through gritted teeth, her media training kicking in to save face. Sebastian never mentioned he was seeing someone. "We prefer to keep our private life private," Sebastian said, slipping his arm around Natalie's waist. The contact sent an unexpected jolt of electricity through both of them, a spark that had nothing to do with their desperate charade. "Natalie isn't comfortable with all the attention that comes with, well, my lifestyle." It was a brilliant deflection, and Natalie caught on immediately. "I'm still getting used to events like these," she admitted, her natural humility adding authenticity to their story. "It's all quite overwhelming." As they continued their conversation, Sebastian found himself genuinely impressed by Natalie's quick thinking and natural charm. She answered Cassandra's probing questions with just the right mix of nervousness and sincerity, creating a believable portrait of a woman new to high society but unintimidated by it. "Oh, and what do you do for work, dear?" Cassandra asked, her tone dripping with condescension, clearly expecting to expose this interloper as another gold-digging nobody. "I'm a pediatric nurse," Natalie answered proudly, lifting her chin with quiet dignity. "I work at St. Mary's Children's Hospital." The response clearly wasn't what Cassandra expected. A gold digger would have invented a more glamorous profession, something that justified her presence in these circles. But a nurse, someone who dedicated her life to helping sick children, was harder to attack without looking heartless. "Yes." "How charitable," Cassandra managed, her smile becoming more strained by the minute. Sebastian felt something stir in his chest. As he watched Natalie hold her own against his ex-fiancée's subtle attacks, there was a strength in her, a quiet confidence that came from knowing her own worth rather than measuring it by her possessions or connections. She was everything Cassandra pretended to be, but could never actually become. "Sebastian," familiar voice interrupted their tense conversation, and Sebastian's blood turned to ice. Thomas Hartwell, Sebastian's father, approached with his characteristic commanding presence. At 62, he was still an imposing figure with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing in business or life. "Dad," Sebastian said, feeling a new wave of panic crash over him. Lying to Cassandra was one thing, but deceiving his father was another matter entirely. Thomas Hartwell had built his empire on reading people, on seeing through facades and finding the truth buried beneath careful words. "I don't believe I've met your companion," Thomas said, his gaze settling on Natalie with curious interest that made Sebastian's palms sweat. "This is Natalie Brooks," Sebastian said, praying she would continue to play along with this increasingly dangerous game. "Natalie, my father, Thomas Hartwell." Natalie switched her tray to her left hand and extended her right to Sebastian's father with the same genuine warmth she'd shown everyone else that evening. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Hartwell. I've heard wonderful things about your company's charitable work." Thomas shook her hand, and Sebastian could see his father's approval in the firm grip and direct eye contact. Thomas Hartwell despised weakness and respected strength, regardless of its packaging. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Brooks. Sebastian has excellent taste." "Thank you, sir," Natalie replied, slight blush coloring her cheeks that only made her appear more genuine and less calculated. An hour later, Sebastian managed to guide Natalie away from the crowd to a quiet corner of the hotel's garden terrace. The city lights twinkled below them like fallen stars, and the cool night air provided blessed relief from the suffocating atmosphere of the ballroom. Here, away from prying eyes and listening ears, they could finally drop their masks. "Can't. Thank you enough," Sebastian said, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture that revealed more vulnerability than any of his carefully crafted public speeches. "You saved me from a very uncomfortable situation." Natalie set down her empty tray and studied him carefully, seeing past the billionaire facade to the desperate man underneath. "That woman Cassandra, she's your ex-fiancée," Sebastian corrected, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "We broke up 3 months ago, but she refuses to accept it's over. She seems persistent." Sebastian laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. That's one way to put it. "She's been threatening to make scenes at public events if I don't take her back. Tonight was just the beginning." Natalie nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "And having a girlfriend would make her back off." "Exactly." Sebastian looked at her intently, seeing something in her face that made his heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with their charade. "Natalie, I know this is crazy, but what if we continued this arrangement for a while? Just until Cassandra moves on? You want to pay me to be your fake girlfriend?" Natalie's voice was carefully neutral, but Sebastian caught the flash of something. Hurt in her eyes. "I know how it sounds," Sebastian said quickly, desperate to fix whatever damage his clumsy words had caused. "But I saw you tonight. You're incredible under pressure, and you clearly need the money if you're working as both a nurse and a server." Natalie felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Her financial struggles were that obvious, even to a stranger who'd known her for less than 2 hours. "I have a younger brother in college," Natalie found herself explaining, though she wasn't sure why she felt the need to justify her circumstances to this man. "Jamie's studying to be an engineer, but the tuition is killing me. Our parents died in a car accident 2 years ago, and I'm all he has." Sebastian's expression softened with genuine sympathy that caught Natalie off guard. In her experience, the wealthy either ignored poverty or exploited it. They didn't look at her with understanding and respect. "I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you." Natalie took a deep breath, trying to process the surreal turn her evening had taken. What exactly would this arrangement involve? A few public appearances, maybe some family events. Nothing inappropriate, I promise. Just enough to convince Cassandra and the media that I'm unavailable. Natalie stared out at the city lights, weighing her options with a heart that hammered against her ribs. The money Sebastian was undoubtedly prepared to offer could solve all her financial problems. Jamie could focus on his studies instead of working part-time jobs that were destroying his grades. She could stop pulling double shifts and maybe even go back to school herself. But pretending to love someone, even for money, went against everything. She believed in about honesty and integrity. "I need some time to think about it," she said finally. "Of course," Sebastian replied, pulling out his business card with hands that trembled slightly. "My personal number is on the back. Whatever you decide, thank you again for tonight." As Natalie took the card, their fingers brushed, and that same electric spark passed between them. For a moment, neither pulled away, both caught in an unexpected connection that felt more real than anything else that had happened in that ballroom full of lies. Maybe this arrangement wouldn't be as fake as they thought. 3 days after the charity gala, Natalie found herself sitting in Sebastian's penthouse office, overwhelmed by the sprawling city view beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was modern and sleek, with minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary. Sebastian sat across from her looking more relaxed in casual jeans and a white button-down shirt. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he chose each word. "So we're really doing this?" Natalie said, signing the last page of what had to be the most unusual contract ever written. The terms were generous but clear. She would accompany Sebastian to social events for 6 weeks, act as his girlfriend in public, and receive $50,000 for her services. "We're really doing this," Sebastian confirmed, sliding a check. Across the mahogany desk, the amount made Natalie's hands shake as she folded it carefully into her purse. The first few appearances went smoothly. A business dinner where she charmed Sebastian's investors with stories about her work at the children's hospital. A gallery opening where she genuinely enjoyed the art while Sebastian networked. A charity lunch where she felt useful for the first time in months. Discussing pediatric care with other medical professionals in attendance. But it was the quiet moments between performances that began to unravel them both. "Tell me something real about yourself," Sebastian said one evening, as they walked through Central Park after a particularly brutal board meeting dinner. The autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves, and the city lights reflected in the lake like scattered diamonds.
"Oh, what do you mean?"
Natalie asked, pulling her coat tighter against the chill. "Everyone tonight talked about profit margins and market shares. You talked about the 7-year-old patient who drew you a picture of a superhero nurse. I want to know more about that person." Natalie was quiet for a long moment, watching ducks glide across the dark water. "When I was 12, my mom got cancer, leukemia. I spent 3 years watching nurses hold her hand when the pain got too bad, watching them celebrate with us when her blood counts improved, watching them cry with us when she didn't make it." Sebastian stopped walking. "I thought you said your parents died in a car accident." "They did. Mom's cancer came back when I was 15. She fought for 2 more years, then went into remission. She was cancer-free for almost a decade before the car accident." Natalie's voice remained steady, but Sebastian could see the pain she carried like a physical weight. "I became a nurse because I wanted to be that person for other families. One who doesn't give up." "And Jamie? How old was he when you became his guardian?" 17. "Old enough to hate me for trying to parent him, young enough to need someone to fight for his future." She smiled sadly. "Some days I'm not sure which one of us is raising the other." Sebastian found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. How his mother had died when he was 8, leaving him alone with a father who loved him but showed it through expectations and achievements. How he'd built his company not just for success, but to prove he was worth the sacrifice his father had made, working 80-hour weeks to give Sebastian every opportunity. "I haven't felt genuinely happy in years," Sebastian admitted as they sat on a bench overlooking the reservoir. "Until recently." Recently, he looked at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Since I met a nurse who pretends to be my girlfriend and makes me remember what it feels like to be human." Natalie's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't part of their arrangement. This was dangerous territory that threatened to destroy the careful boundaries they'd established. "Sebastian, I know," he said quietly. "I know this complicates everything." Next morning, Natalie woke to 17 missed calls from an unknown number. When she finally answered, Cassandra's voice cut through the phone like broken glass. "I know exactly what you're doing, little nurse. I'm sorry, who is this? Don't play dumb with me. I've been watching you, studying you. You think you can waltz into Sebastian's life and take what's mine?" Natalie's blood turned cold. "I don't know what you're talking about. $50,000. That's what he's paying you, isn't it?" "I hired a private investigator. I know about your brother's tuition, your pathetic apartment, your double shifts. I know everything about your sad little life." The phone slipped from Natalie's numb fingers. Cassandra knew. Somehow, she'd uncovered their arrangement. And now, she had the power to destroy them both. When Sebastian arrived at her apartment an hour later, Natalie was pacing like a caged animal. "She knows," she said before he could even close the door. "Cassandra knows about the contract, the money, everything." Sebastian's face went pale. "How, private investigator? She threatened me, Sebastian. Said she'd expose everything unless—" Natalie couldn't finish the sentence. "Unless what? Unless I disappear from your life? Permanently." Sebastian pulled out his phone, his jaw set in hard lines. I'm calling my lawyers. We can fight this. With what? She's right about everything. I am just a nurse taking money to pretend to love you. The words tasted like ash in Natalie's mouth. Maybe this was a mistake from the beginning. Don't say that. Sebastian reached for her, but she stepped away, and the distance between them felt like an ocean. I need time to think, Natalie said, her voice hollow. Please go. Sebastian stood in her doorway for a long moment, looking like he wanted to say something that might fix this disaster they'd created. Instead, he nodded once and left, taking with him the warmth Natalie hadn't realized she'd grown to depend on. That night, as she stared at Cassandra's check lying on her kitchen table, Natalie made a decision that would either save them both or destroy any chance they had at something real. She was going to tell Sebastian the truth about why she'd really agreed to their arrangement. The truth that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the way he'd looked at her that first night. Desperate and vulnerable and more real than anyone she'd ever met. But first, she had to survive what Cassandra was planning to do to them both. The envelope arrived at Sebastian's office the next morning, hand-delivered by a courier who disappeared before his assistant could ask questions. Inside were photographs, Sebastian and Natalie at the charity gala, walking through Central Park, sharing what looked like intimate moments on his terrace. Each image was accompanied by a timestamp and location. The final item was a copy of their contract with key passages highlighted in red. Sebastian's blood turned to ice when he read the accompanying note, written in Cassandra's elegant script. A board meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Your investors might be interested to know how you've been spending company money on personal entertainment. Unless, of course, you'd like to discuss our future together over dinner tonight. Your choice. See, his hand shook as he dialed Natalie's number, but it went straight to voicemail. He had tried the hospital, but they said she'd called in sick. He arrived at her apartment. The landlord informed him she'd left early that morning with a suitcase. Sebastian's world crumbled as he realized what Cassandra had done. She hadn't just threatened to expose their arrangement. She'd somehow convinced Natalie to disappear. The check he'd given Natalie was still cashed. But $50,000 felt like blood money now. Payment for the one real thing that had happened to him in years. At Hartwell Technologies, the emergency board meeting convened with military precision. 12 of the most powerful investors in the tech world sat around the polished conference table, their faces ranging from confused to hostile. Cassandra sat at the far end like a spider in her web, dressed in a pristine white suit that made her look innocent and wronged. Gentlemen, Cassandra began, her voice dripping with false concern, I've called this meeting because I'm worried about Sebastian's judgment as his former fiancée and someone who cares deeply about this company's future. I feel obligated to share some disturbing information. Sebastian watched in horror as she distributed copies of the contract, the photographs, and bank records showing the $50,000 payment. The room grew colder with each page they turned. As you can see, Cassandra continued, Sebastian has been using company funds to pay for the services of a woman who is essentially hired to pose as his girlfriend. This raises serious questions about his decision-making abilities and his fitness to lead this company. Thomas Hartwell, who'd been silent until now, spoke in a voice that could cut diamond. Sebastian, explain this. Sebastian stood, knowing his next words would either save his company or destroy everything he'd built. The contract is real. I paid Natalie Brooks to accompany me to social events. Murmurs erupted around the table. One investor, Marcus Chen, leaned forward with predatory interest. You paid a woman to pretend to be your girlfriend? What kind of judgment is that? It's the kind that comes from being harassed by my ex-fiancée for months, Sebastian said, his voice growing stronger. Cassandra's been stalking me, threatening to make scenes at business events, and refusing to accept that our relationship is over. I made a desperate decision to protect myself and this company's reputation. By hiring an actress? Another board member scoffed. By hiring someone real. Sebastian's voice rang with conviction now. Natalie Brooks is a pediatric nurse who works double shifts to support her younger brother. She agreed to help me because she needed money for his college tuition. What started as a business arrangement became something genuine. Cassandra's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the fury underneath. How touching, but the fact remains that you used company money for personal problems. Actually, a new voice interrupted from the doorway. He didn't. Everyone turned to see Natalie standing in the entrance to the boardroom, still in her nurse's scrubs from a double shift she'd worked after driving to the city limits and back, trying to figure out what to do. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She had no makeup on, and she looked exhausted. But she also looked absolutely fearless. Natalie Sebastian breathed, relief and terror warring in his chest. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Natalie said, walking into the room with the same quiet confidence she'd shown at the charity gala. "But I heard there was some confusion about our arrangement." She reached into her purse and pulled out an uncashed check, placing it on the conference table for everyone to see. "I never deposited Sebastian's payment. The money came from his personal account, not company funds. And I'm here to tell you exactly why I agreed to help him." Cassandra's face went white as her carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. 3 months ago, Natalie continued, Cassandra Vale hired someone to hack into my personal accounts, dig into my family's history, and find leverage to use against me. She's been watching me, following me, and threatening me to try to force Sebastian back into a relationship. Last night, she offered me $100,000 to disappear permanently. The room erupted in shocked voices, but Natalie pressed on. "I turned her down because I realized something important. What Sebastian and I have isn't fake anymore. It stopped being fake the moment we started caring about each other more than we cared about protecting ourselves." She turned to face Sebastian, directly, her brown eyes blazing with emotion. "I love you. Not your money, not your company, not your status. I love the man who talks to sick children in hospital waiting rooms, who remembers the names of every server and security guard in his building, who built an empire, but never forgot what it feels like to be human." "Natalie," Sebastian said, moving toward her. "I'm not finished." She held up a hand, then turned back to the board. "Cassandra Vale is a predator who preys on successful men and tries to destroy anyone who threatens her meal ticket. If you want to question someone's judgment, question why you're listening to a woman who hired criminals to stalk and harass people." Thomas Hartwell stood slowly, his sharp eyes moving between Cassandra and his son. "Ms. Vale, is this true?" "Oh, of course not," Cassandra said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "She's obviously lying to save her fake boyfriend." "Then you won't mind if we examine your phone records and financial statements?" Thomas said. "I'm sure we'll find nothing connecting you to any private investigators or suspicious payments." Cassandra's composure finally shattered completely. "You're all fools if you choose her over me. Sebastian needs someone from his own world, someone who understands how this life works. I need someone who makes me want to be better than I am," Sebastian said, taking Natalie's hand. "Someone who chooses love over money every single time." The board voted unanimously to dismiss Cassandra's allegations and censure her for attempting to manipulate company business with personal vendettas. As she stormed out, promising lawsuits and revenge, Sebastian pulled Natalie into his arms. "I can't believe you came back," he whispered against her hair. "I never really left," she whispered back. "I just needed to figure out how to fight for us instead of running away." But as they held each other in that sterile boardroom, neither of them noticed the look of pure hatred on Cassandra's face as she made one final phone call in the hallway. The war was far from over. 2 weeks later, Natalie was working the late shift at St. Mary's Children's Hospital when her world exploded. She was checking on Emma, a 6-year-old leukemia patient who always asked for the nice nurse with the pretty smile when her supervisor appeared in the doorway with a face like stone. "Natalie, I need to see you in my office now." Dr. Patricia Martinez had been Natalie's mentor for 3 years. The woman who taught her that healing required both medical skill and emotional courage. Now, she sat across from Natalie with files spread across her desk, each one bearing official hospital letterhead. "Tell me these allegations aren't true," Dr. Martinez said, her voice heavy with disappointment. Natalie stared at the papers, reading words that made her stomach turn to ice. Falsified patient records, theft of medical supplies, inappropriate conduct with wealthy donors. Each accusation was carefully crafted, devastating, and completely false. Patricia, you know me. I would never. I know what I thought I knew. Dr. Martinez held up a photograph that made Natalie's blood freeze. It showed her in Sebastian's penthouse, taken through the floor-to-ceiling windows with a telephoto lens. But this suggests you've been living a double life I knew nothing about. That's not what this looks like. It looks like a nurse who's been selling access to our pediatric ward to a billionaire, who gets his kicks from playing savior to sick children. It looks like someone who's been stealing morphine and selling it to fund a lifestyle she can't afford. Hands shook as she realized the scope of Cassandra's revenge. This wasn't just about destroying her relationship with Sebastian. This was about destroying her life, her career, everything she'd built and sacrificed for. I need to call Sebastian, Natalie said, reaching for her phone. Your boyfriend is part of the problem, Dr. Martinez said coldly. Hospital security found $20,000 in cash hidden in your locker, along with vials of morphine that are missing from our inventory. The room spun around Natalie as she understood the trap Cassandra had set. Every piece of evidence was circumstantial but damning, designed to paint her as a corrupt nurse who'd sold her integrity for money and status. I'm suspending you pending a full investigation, Dr. Martinez continued. If these allegations are proven true, you'll face criminal charges and lose your nursing license permanently. Natalie sat in her car in the hospital parking lot for an hour, staring at her phone. She wanted to call Sebastian, to fall apart in his arms, and let him fix this with his lawyers and his money. But she knew Cassandra was counting on exactly that reaction. The moment Sebastian tried to help her, it would only confirm the narrative that she was a gold digger who'd corrupted herself for wealth. Instead, she drove to Jamie's dorm room at NYU. Her 19-year-old brother took one look at her face and pulled her into the tiny space he shared with his roommate. What happened? Jamie asked, and Natalie told him everything. About the fake relationship that became real, about Cassandra's war against them, about the allegations that could destroy her career and send her to prison. Let Sebastian help you, Jamie said immediately. If he loves you like you say he does, he'll fight for you. If he helps me, it proves Cassandra's point, that I'm just another woman using him for his money and connections. Jamie grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. Nat, you've been fighting alone your whole life. Mom's cancer, Dad's depression, raising me, putting yourself through nursing school. When do you get to let someone else carry the weight? Before Natalie could answer, her phone rang. Sebastian's name lit up the screen, and her heart broke a little more with each vibration. I have to disappear, she whispered. It's the only way to protect him and clear my name. That's the stupidest thing you've ever said, Jamie replied. And you once tried to convince me that vegetables were candy. But Natalie was already moving, grabbing the few belongings she kept in Jamie's room. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him this isn't his fault. Natalie, don't you dare. She was gone before he could finish the sentence. For 3 days, Sebastian searched for her like a man possessed. He hired private investigators, called every hospital within 200 miles, and even considered having Cassandra arrested for harassment. But Natalie had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. On the 4th day, Thomas Hartwell found his son in his office at 3 a.m, staring at the city lights with hollow eyes. You look like hell, Thomas observed, settling into the chair across from Sebastian's desk. I lost her, Dad. I lost the only real thing that's ever happened to me. Have you considered that maybe she's not lost? Maybe she's hiding? Sebastian looked up, seeing something in his father's expression that he'd never noticed before. Understanding, compassion, love that had always been there, but expressed through expectations rather than words. There's something I never told you. About your mother, Thomas continued. When I first met her, she was a secretary in my law firm, was already successful, already on my way to building this empire. She refused to date me for 6 months because she was convinced I saw her as a temporary diversion. What changed her mind? I quit my job. Sebastian stared at his father in shock. You what? I walked away from everything I'd built and took a position as a junior associate at a smaller firm. Proved to her that I valued our love more than my status or my money. Thomas smiled at the memory. We built this company together. Your mother and I, every decision, every risk, every triumph. She wasn't my accessory. She was my partner, Dad. Your nurse isn't hiding from you, Sebastian. She's hiding from the woman who's trying to destroy her. So the question is, what are you willing to sacrifice to prove that your love is stronger than Cassandra's hate? The answer came to Sebastian like lightning striking twice in the same place. He found Natalie at the Children's Hospital, where she'd first started working, small public facility in Queens, where she'd been volunteering during her suspension. She was reading to a group of young patients when he appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd walked through fire to find her. Sebastian, she breathed, her heart stopping at the sight of him. What are you doing here? I'm here to tell you that I'm dissolving Hartwell Technologies. Book fell from her numb fingers. What? I'm liquidating my assets, selling the company, and donating 90% of the proceeds to pediatric hospitals across the country. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. The remaining 10% will go into a trust fund for your brother's education and a foundation in your name to support nurses who've been falsely accused of professional misconduct. Sebastian, you can't. That company is your life. No, Natalie, you're my life. The company is just money and buildings and stock prices. You're the reason I remember how to be human. Tears streamed down her face as she understood what he was offering. Not just his wealth, but his entire identity, everything he'd built and achieved. He was willing to strip away every advantage Cassandra could use against them, to become nobody so they could be somebody together. I won't let you destroy your legacy for me, she whispered. My legacy isn't a company, Sebastian said, taking her hands. My legacy is the life I build with the woman I love, the children we might have someday, the good we can do together, the way we make each other better. Behind them, a group of young patients had gathered to watch this real-life fairy tale unfold. 6-year-old Emma, the leukemia patient who always asked for Natalie, tugged on Sebastian's expensive suit jacket. Are you the prince? She asked with the directness that only children possess. Sebastian knelt down to Emma's eye level, his smile transforming his entire face. I'm just a man who's very lucky to love your favorite nurse. Is she going to marry you? Sebastian looked up at Natalie, his heart in his eyes. I don't know. Haven't asked her yet. The impromptu proposal happened there in the children's ward, surrounded by young patients who cheered as if they were watching the best movie ever made. Sebastian knelt on the hospital floor in his $1,000 suit, offering Natalie a future that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with love. I can't promise you wealth or status, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. I can't promise you easy or simple or safe, but I can promise you real. I can promise you a love that chooses you every single day, a partnership that makes us both stronger and a lifetime of proving that some things are worth more than money. Natalie looked around the room at the children who'd become her second family, at the man who'd sacrificed an empire for the chance to love her freely, at the future spreading out before them like an uncharted map. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Strong enough for everyone to hear. Yes. The children erupted in cheers that could probably be heard 3 floors away. Sebastian swept Natalie into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing through their tears. 6 months later, Cassandra Vale was arrested for harassment, stalking, and filing false reports. The evidence Sebastian's investigators had gathered painted a picture of a woman who'd orchestrated an elaborate campaign of psychological warfare. She would spend the next 2 years in prison and emerge to find that the world had moved on without her. Sebastian kept his word about the company, though his father convinced him to maintain a small consulting firm that specialized in ethical technology development. Natalie's nursing license was fully restored when the investigation revealed the planted evidence, and she eventually became head of pediatric nursing at St. Mary's. They were married in the same children's ward where Sebastian had proposed, surrounded by young patients who served as flower girls and ring bearers. Emma, now in remission and cancer-free, served as maid of honor. Years later, when people asked Sebastian if he regretted giving up his billions for love, he would smile and point to his wife teaching their own children how to be kind to others, how to measure success by the lives they touched rather than the money they accumulated. I traded an empire for a kingdom, he would say, Best business decision I ever made. The end.